The lawyer's voice stopped mid-sentence when the door slammed open, and a man in trail dust filled the frame like a storm about to break. Cora Mercer sat frozen in the straight-backed chair, her gloved hands tight on the inheritance papers she had not yet signed. The cramped office above the Mercantile smelled of ink and old leather, and now something sharper. Something like danger walked in on boot heels. The man in the doorway had dark eyes that swept the room and locked on her with an intensity that made her breath catch. His coat was heavy with the cold outside. His jaw was tight under a short beard. He looked at her like she was the last thing standing between him and ruin. The lawyer, a thin man named Parsons, cleared his throat and gestured weakly. "This is Miss Mercer. Miss Mercer, this is Wyatt Granger, your new partner." Cora's stomach dropped. Partner. The word tasted like a trap. She had come to Eagle Basin 2 weeks ago to bury an uncle she barely remembered and collect a small inheritance. A modest sum, Parsons had written. Enough to secure your future. He had not mentioned a failing ranch. He had not mentioned a man with a reputation dark enough to make the townspeople cross the street when his name came up. Wyatt stepped inside and shut the door with care that felt like a warning. "Parsons," he said. His voice was low and even. "You told me I had until spring to buy out the other half." Parsons shuffled the papers. "Your uncle's will was, unexpected. Miss Mercer inherits 50%. The ranch stays whole, or it goes to auction." Cora stood. Her pulse hammered, but she kept her chin level. She had learned young how to hide fear behind a school teacher's calm. "I did not come here to take anything from anyone. If there is a fair arrangement, I am willing to discuss it." Wyatt's gaze cut to her. Fair. The word came out bitter. He looked at Parsons. "She knows what they are saying about me in town?" Parsons flinched. "That is not relevant to the inheritance. It is if she decides I am a thief and sides with the Basin Council." Wyatt turned back to Cora. "They say I have been stealing water, cutting channels, drying out the smaller spreads downstream. They say I owe damages. They say I should be run out or worse." Cora met his eyes. She had heard the rumors. The schoolhouse parents had whispered them with sidelong glances, as if guilt were something you could catch. "Have you? Stolen water?" His jaw tightened. "No." "Then why do they believe it?" "Because the basin is drying up, and someone has to hang for it." Wyatt pulled a folded map from his coat and spread it on the desk. The old channels were cut 20 years ago. Before I owned the land, I have been trying to restore the original flow. That makes me the enemy, because it means the big outfits upstream lose their extra share. Parsons coughed. "The Basin Council has filed a complaint. If damages are awarded, the ranch will be seized. That is why your uncle left it split. He thought 2 owners might, complicate the seizure." Cora stared at the map. Lines of ink marked waterways she did not understand. She had spent the last 8 years teaching grammar and sums to children in a Missouri town where the greatest danger was a late frost. She knew nothing about water rights. She knew nothing about cattle. But she knew what it felt like to be blamed for something you did not do. She knew what it felt like when no one believed you. She looked at Wyatt. "If I sign, I own half a ranch that might be taken. If you sign, you own half a fight." He met her gaze without blinking. "I will not lie to you. This is not a safe inheritance. But if you walk away, Parsons auctions it, and the Basin Council gets it cheap. Then they bury the water case, and no one ever knows the truth. Why does the truth matter to you? Because I made a promise. Wyatt's voice went quiet. Your uncle believed me when no one else did. He fronted me the money to buy in. He said the land was worth saving. I owe him that. Cora felt something shift in her chest. Loneliness recognized loneliness. She had seen that look in her own mirror every morning since her father died, since the church women had smiled and suggested she was too soft to manage alone, since she had swallowed her pride and become what they expected. Gentle, agreeable, safe. She picked up the pen. Where do I sign? Parsons blinked. Miss Mercer, you should take time to consider. I have considered. She signed her name in careful script. What happens now? Wyatt folded the map. Now we finish the cattle drive. We have 60 head waiting in the north pasture. We move them to winter ground before the Basin Council convinces the sheriff to freeze the herd as collateral. If we lose the cattle, we lose everything. When do we leave? Tomorrow, at first light. He looked at her as if seeing her for the first time. You ever been on a drive? No. You ride? Yes. He nodded once. Bring warm clothes. It is going to be cold. That night, Cora lay awake in the boarding house and listened to the wind rattle the shutters. She thought about her students back in Missouri. She thought about the small room she had rented above the dressmaker's shop and the narrow life she had built there. She thought about Wyatt's eyes and the way he had looked at her like she was someone who might stand her ground. No one had looked at her that way in a very long time. At dawn, she dressed in her plainest skirt and heaviest coat. She packed a second shawl and her father's old gloves. She left a note for the boarding house keeper and walked to the edge of town, where Wyatt waited with 2 horses and a pack mule. He handed her the reins of a steady-looking sorrel mare. Her name is Rosie. She does not spook easy. Cora mounted. The saddle felt solid under her. She had not ridden in months, but her body remembered. Where is the herd? 3 miles north. We drive them west along the Basin Rim and then south to the Winter Range. 50 miles if the weather holds. He swung onto a tall bay gelding and looked at her. You change your mind. Now is the time. I have not changed my mind. They rode out as the sun broke cold and red over the hills. The north pasture sat in a shallow valley, ringed by low hills covered in dry grass. 60 cattle milled near a stock tank, their breath steaming in the cold air. A younger man stood near the gate, lean and restless. He looked up when they approached, and his face went tight. Wyatt reined in. Cora, this is Danny. He works the ranch. Danny, this is Miss Mercer. She owns the other half now. Danny touched his hat brim, but his eyes were wary. Ma'am. He looked at Wyatt. You sure about this? Town is already stirred up. Adding a woman to the drive is going to make it worse. Then they can stay stirred. Wyatt dismounted. We move the herd now. If we wait, the sheriff shows up with a writ. Danny shook his head, but he opened the gate. The cattle began to drift toward the gap. Cora stayed mounted and watched the way Wyatt moved, calm and sure, turning the lead animals west with small adjustments of his horse. Danny rode the opposite flank. She followed, keeping to the rear, trying not to crowd the stragglers. The morning passed in a rhythm of hooves and lowing and cold wind. Cora's hands ached inside her gloves. Her legs burned from gripping the saddle. But she did not complain. She watched Wyatt and Danny and learned the silent language of the drive. The way a shout or a wave could turn a stubborn steer. The way patience mattered more than force. By midday, they had covered 8 miles. Wyatt called a halt near a dry creek bed. He swung down and pulled jerky and hardtack from his saddlebag. Cora dismounted, and her knees nearly buckled. She steadied herself against Rosie's shoulder. Wyatt handed her a canteen. "You are doing fine. I feel like I have been trampled. You will feel worse tomorrow." He almost smiled. "But you did not turn back. I said I would not." People say a lot of things. He bit into the jerky. Not many follow through. Danny rode up and dismounted. "Storm coming." He pointed west. Dark clouds massed along the horizon like a bruise. "We push hard. We might make the way station before it hits." "How far?" 10 miles. Wyatt looked at the herd, then at the sky. "We push." They rode into the teeth of the wind. The temperature dropped. The cattle balked and scattered. Wyatt and Danny worked the flanks, pushing the herd tight. Cora rode rear guard, her face numb, her eyes watering. The first snow came in stinging flakes that turned the world gray. The way station appeared like a ghost through the storm. A low cabin and a sagging barn. Wyatt shouted over the wind, "Get them in the corral. We shelter inside." Danny turned the lead steers toward the fence. Cora rode hard to turn a pair of runaways. Rosie slipped on the icy ground, and Cora grabbed the saddle horn, her heart in her throat. The mare found her footing and lunged forward. The cattle turned. By the time the last animal was penned, the storm was a wall of white. Wyatt pulled the barn door shut and latched it. Danny ran for the cabin. Cora slid from the saddle and nearly fell. Wyatt caught her elbow. Inside. Now, the cabin was a single room with a stone fireplace and a dirt floor. Danny already had a fire going. Wyatt stripped off his gloves and coat and checked the shutters. The wind howled against the walls. Cora sank onto a wooden bench near the fire. Her hands shook as she pulled off her gloves. Wyatt crouched beside her. "Let me see." Her fingers were white at the tips. He took her hands in his and rubbed them gently. His palms were rough and warm. She should have pulled away. She did not. "You should have said something," he muttered. "I did not want to slow us down. You are no good to me with frozen fingers." He kept rubbing until the blood returned and the pain came sharp and bright. She bit her lip. He glanced up. "That hurts." "Yes." "Good. That means they are still yours." He let go and stood. "Danny, check the horses. I will see what provisions we have." Cora flexed her aching fingers. She watched Wyatt move through the small space, efficient and calm. He found a sack of cornmeal and a tin of lard. He pulled a pot from a hook and set it near the fire. Danny came back in, shaking snow from his hat. "Horses are fine. Storm is getting worse. We are not moving tomorrow." Wyatt nodded. "We waited out." They ate cornmeal mush in silence. The cabin grew warm. Outside, the storm screamed. Cora sat with her back against the wall and felt exhaustion pull at her. Danny stretched out near the fire and fell asleep. Wyatt stayed by the window, watching the white dark beyond the shutter slats. Cora spoke quietly. "Why did my uncle trust you?" Wyatt did not turn. "Because I told him the truth." Most people do not want the truth. They want a story that fits what they already believe. What is the truth? That the basin is dying because the big outfits upstream built illegal dams 20 years ago. They have been bleeding the water ever since. When your uncle and I started breaking those dams and restoring the old channels, we made enemies. Powerful ones. Why not take it to court? We tried. The judge is the cousin of the biggest upstream rancher. He threw out the case. He said we did not have standing because we were, quote, recent transplants with questionable character. Wyatt's voice went hard. Your uncle was born in Eagle Basin. I bought in legal. But that did not matter. We were in the way. What happened to my uncle? He took a fall from his horse last spring. Broke his neck. Wyatt turned to look at her. The sheriff said it was an accident. I do not believe that. Cora's chest tightened. You think he was killed? I think he was asking too many questions about who ordered the dams built. I think someone decided to shut him up. Do you have proof? No. Just a feeling. Wyatt crossed to the fire and sat down across from her. That is why I am finishing this. If I can move the herd, sell them, and buy out the rest of the ranch, I can hold the land long enough to prove the water theft. If I lose the ranch, the Basin Council buries everything, and your uncle died for nothing. Cora looked at him in the firelight. His face was lean and hard, but his eyes were tired. She saw the weight he carried. She saw the loneliness underneath. You are trying to protect his memory. I am trying to keep a promise. She understood that. She had spent years trying to protect her father's memory, trying to be what he had believed she could be, even when everyone else saw her as something fragile. She leaned forward. Then, we finished the drive. Together. Wyatt studied her. You do not owe me anything. I owe my uncle. And I owe myself. She met his gaze. I am tired of being afraid. I am tired of being afraid. Something shifted in his expression. He nodded once. All right. The storm lasted 2 days. They rationed the cornmeal and melted snow for water. Danny grew restless and paced the cabin. Wyatt checked the cattle twice a day, coming back coated in ice. Cora kept the fire going and tried not to think about how small the space was. How aware she was of every move Wyatt made. Every time his shoulder brushed hers when he passed. On the second night, Danny fell asleep early. Cora sat near the fire, mending a torn seam in her coat. Wyatt sat across from her, oiling his saddle with careful strokes. You are good at that, she said. At what? Not talking. He glanced up. You want me to talk? I want to know why you stayed. After my uncle died. You could have left. Where would I go? He set down the rag. I have been running since I was 16. Town to town, ranch to ranch. Always one step ahead of something. A bad reputation. A family name I did not ask for. When your uncle offered me a steak, it was the first time anyone saw me as something other than trouble. I am not running anymore. Cora's hand stilled. What family name? Granger. He said it flat. My father was Frank Granger. You heard of him? She had. Every schoolchild in Missouri had heard of Frank Granger. Outlaw. Train robber. Hanged in Kansas 10 years ago. Her throat went dry. That is your wound. Wyatt's jaw tightened. People see the name, and they see him. Does not matter what I do. Does not matter that I was a kid when he died. I am guilty because he was. That is not fair. No. It is not. But it is true. He looked at her. That is why I told you. You deserve to know what you are tied to. Cora set down her coat. Her hands were shaking, but not from cold. My father was a doctor. He treated a man who died of fever. The family blamed him. Said he was careless. Said he was drunk. He was not. But the rumors destroyed him. He lost his practice. He lost his name. He died a year later. I spent 8 years trying to be perfect so no one would remember. Trying to prove I was not my father's shame. Wyatt stared at her. That is why you are so calm. You have been hiding. I have been surviving. He leaned forward. You do not have to hide here. Her breath caught. She looked into his eyes and saw something raw and real. She felt the pull of it, dangerous and terrifying, and more honest than anything she had felt in years. I do not know how to do anything else. You rode into a storm. You signed a paper that tied you to a man half the county wants to hang. He smiled, crooked and slight. You know how. The next morning the storm broke. They dug out the cabin door and found the world buried in white. The cattle huddled in the corral, steam rising from their backs. Wyatt and Danny checked the herd. 2 calves were dead from the cold. The rest were weak, but standing. We leave now, Wyatt said. If we wait, we lose more. They saddled the horses and pushed the herd south. The snow made every mile twice as hard. The cattle stumbled and balked. Cora's legs ached so badly she could barely stay mounted. But she did not stop. She thought about what Wyatt had said. You do not have to hide here. She thought about the way he had looked at her. Like she was someone brave. By dusk they reached a shallow valley with a stand of cottonwoods and a frozen creek. Wyatt called a halt. We camp here tonight. Tomorrow, we make the final push. Danny built a fire. Wyatt walked the edge of the herd, checking for stragglers. Cora unsaddled Rosie and rubbed her down with stiff fingers. When she finished, she found Wyatt standing at the creek edge, staring south. She walked to his side. How much further? 15 miles. If the weather holds, we make it by tomorrow night. He glanced at her. You are holding up better than I expected. You expected me to quit. I expected you to be smart enough to quit. He turned to face her. This is not your fight, Cora. It is now. She stepped closer. You said I do not have to hide. Neither do you. His expression went still. What do you mean? You think you owe my uncle. You think you have to do this alone to prove you are not your father. But you are not alone anymore. She held his gaze. I am here. Let me help. Wyatt looked at her for a long moment. The firelight caught the edge of his face. He reached out and touched her cheek, just a brush of his fingers. rough, and careful. You are stubborn. So are you. He almost smiled. Then his hand dropped, and he stepped back. Get some rest. Tomorrow is going to be hard. She lay awake that night under a blanket near the fire and listened to the cattle shifting and the wind moving through the bare branches. She thought about the way Wyatt had touched her face. She thought about the way her heart had kicked when he did. She had not let anyone close in so long. She had been so careful. But careful had made her small. Careful had made her invisible. She did not want to be invisible anymore. At dawn, they pushed the herd south. The sun came up bright and cold. The snow began to melt into mud. The cattle moved slow but steady. By midday, they reached the edge of the Basin Council's land. A fence line ran east to west, sagging wire and weathered posts. Wyatt reined in. Danny rode up beside him. That is Miller's fence. He is not going to like us crossing. We have right of way. Wyatt dismounted and opened the gate. Move them through. They pushed the herd across. Cora was halfway through when she heard hoofbeats. She turned and saw 4 riders coming fast from the east. They wore heavy coats and carried rifles. The lead rider was a thick man with a gray beard. He pulled up hard, and his horse reared. Granger. The man's voice was loud and flat. You are trespassing. Wyatt rode forward. We have right of way, Miller. Check the county records. I do not care about records. You are a thief and a liar. You have been stealing water for 2 years. Now, you are stealing my grass. I have stolen nothing. Wyatt's voice stayed level. Move aside. Miller's men fanned out. One of them leveled a rifle. You are not crossing. Cora's pulse hammered. She looked at Danny. His hand was near his belt, but he did not draw. She looked at Wyatt. He sat his horse, calm and still, but she saw the tension in his shoulders. Miller, Wyatt said quietly, if you shoot me, you will hang. There are witnesses. Miller laughed. Witnesses? A hired hand and a schoolteacher? He spat into the mud. No one is going to believe them. You are a dead man either way, Granger. The town is already drafting a warrant. Sheriff is just waiting for the word. You might as well save us the trouble and disappear now. I am not disappearing. Then you are a fool. Miller gestured to his men. Turn the herd back. One of the men fired a shot into the air. The cattle spooked and scattered. Danny shouted and rode hard to turn them. Cora's horse shied. She grabbed the reins and fought to keep her seat. Wyatt spurred forward and put himself between Miller and the herd. You want to fight, Miller? You fight me. Leave the cattle out of it. Miller grinned. I do not need to fight you. I just need to wait. He turned his horse. When the sheriff comes, I will be there to watch them hang you. He rode off. His men followed. Wyatt sat frozen for a moment. Then he turned and rode after the scattered herd. Cora and Danny worked with him for an hour, gathering the cattle, calming them, pushing them back into a tight group. By the time they had them under control, the sun was past its peak. Danny pulled up beside Wyatt, breathing hard. That was a warning. I know. They are going to come after you. I know. Wyatt looked at Cora. His face was grim. You should go back. This just got worse. Cora shook her head. I am not leaving. Cora. No. She rode closer. You said I do not have to hide. I am done hiding. We finish this. Wyatt stared at her. Then he nodded. All right. We move fast. We get the herd to the buyer tonight, and we get out before the sheriff shows up. They drove the cattle hard. The sun dropped toward the hills. The shadows grew long. Cora's body screamed, but she kept moving. She thought about Miller's face. She thought about the warrant. She thought about the way Wyatt had put himself between the guns and the herd without hesitation. He was not running. He was standing. She would stand with him. They reached the winter range just after dark. A small ranch house sat at the base of a hill, lamplight glowing in the windows. A man came out onto the porch, lantern in hand. Wyatt rode forward. Brody, we have your cattle. The man, Brody, walked down and opened the corral gate. Took you long enough. We hit a storm. I heard. I also heard the Basin Council is looking for you. Brody studied Wyatt. You sure you want to sell tonight? If the sheriff shows up, he can seize the herd before I pay you. That is why we are selling tonight. Wyatt dismounted. You want them or not? I want them. Brody pulled a pouch from his coat. Gold, like we agreed. He handed it over. You are a fool for coming back here, Granger. Maybe. They pushed the cattle into the corral. Danny shut the gate. Cora slid from her horse, and her legs buckled. Wyatt caught her before she hit the ground. Easy. I am fine. You are not. He lifted her without effort and carried her toward the house. Brody, she needs a place to rest. Brody's wife appeared in the doorway, a small woman with a kind face. Bring her in. Wyatt set Cora down on a wooden chair near the fire. She wanted to protest, but her body had given up. Brody's wife brought her hot coffee and a blanket. Wyatt crouched beside her. Drink. She drank. The coffee burned her throat, but it steadied her. She looked at him. We did it. We did. What happens now? Now we go back to Eagle Basin and face the warrant. Wyatt's voice was quiet. I am not running. But you can. Take your half of the sale and leave. Go back to Missouri. Forget this. Cora set down the cup. Her hands were shaking, but her voice was steady. I am not leaving. We are partners. That means I stand with you. Wyatt's expression went raw. They might hang me. Then I will be there. He looked at her like she was something impossible. Then he leaned forward and kissed her. It was not gentle. It was fierce and desperate, and full of everything they had not said. Cora's hands came up to his coat, and she kissed him back, tasting dust and cold and something that felt like hope. When he pulled away, his forehead rested against hers. You are going to get yourself killed. Maybe. She smiled, shaky. But at least I will not die hiding. He almost laughed. Then he stood and pulled her to her feet. We rest tonight. At dawn we ride back. They left at first light. Brody gave them supplies and a warning. The Basin Council met last night. They are drafting a formal complaint. Sheriff is riding out this morning with a writ. How much time do we have? Maybe a day. Maybe less. Brody looked at Cora. Miss, you should stay here. This is not going to end well. Cora mounted Rosie. Thank you for the offer. But I am going with him. Brody shook his head. You are both fools. They rode hard. The sun climbed, and the air warmed. By midday they reached the basin rim. Eagle Basin spread below them, a cluster of buildings near a dry riverbed. Smoke rose from chimneys. Cora could see people moving in the streets. Wyatt reined in. We go in quiet. We find Parsons. We show him the bill of sale. We prove the ranch is solvent. That buys us time to fight the water case. And if the sheriff is already there, then we deal with it. Wyatt looked at her. Last chance. Cora, I am not changing my mind. They rode down into town. People stopped and stared. Cora felt their eyes like weights. She kept her chin up. Wyatt rode beside her, calm and steady. Danny brought up the rear. They turned onto the main street and headed for Parsons' office. The sheriff stepped out of the jail. He was a broad man with a thick mustache and a star on his chest. He held a paper in his hand. Granger, stop right there. Wyatt reined in. Sheriff, I have a warrant for your arrest. Water theft. Destruction of property. You are coming with me. I have a right to answer the charges. You will answer them from a cell. The sheriff gestured to two deputies. They stepped forward with rifles. Get down. Wyatt dismounted slowly. Cora's heart hammered. She looked around. A crowd was gathering. She saw Miller at the edge, grinning. She saw townspeople she had taught, parents who had smiled at her in church. None of them moved. Wyatt handed over his gun. The deputies grabbed his arms. One of them twisted his wrist. Wyatt did not resist. Cora slid from her horse. Sheriff, she said. Her voice carried. What are the specific charges? The sheriff looked at her. This does not concern you, Miss Mercer. I own half the ranch. It concerns me. What are the charges? Theft of water. Cutting illegal channels. Damages to downstream properties. The sheriff held up the paper. Signed by the Basin Council. Who filed the complaint? Miller and two others. Cora turned to face the crowd. She saw faces she knew. She saw fear and suspicion, and the same ugly certainty she had seen back in Missouri when they had blamed her father. She felt the old instinct to stay quiet, to keep her head down. She ignored it. Miller is lying, she said. Her voice was clear. The channels were cut 20 years ago. Wyatt has been restoring the original flow. The big outfits upstream are the ones stealing water. They built illegal dams. They have been draining the basin for profit. My uncle knew it. He was gathering proof. That is why he died. The crowd murmured. The sheriff frowned. That is a serious accusation. It is the truth. Cora stepped closer. Arrest Wyatt if you want. But the Basin Council is covering up the real crime. And if you let them, this town dies with the water. Miller pushed through the crowd. She is lying to protect him. Everyone knows Granger is a thief. His father was a thief. He is just finishing the job. Cora turned to Miller. My father was a doctor. He was blamed for a death he did not cause. I know what it looks like when powerful men destroy a good man to protect themselves. That is what you are doing. And it will not work. Miller's face went red. You do not know what you are talking about. Then let Wyatt answer the charges in court. Let him present evidence. If he is guilty, he hangs. But if you hang him without a trial, you are the criminals. The sheriff looked uncertain. The crowd shifted. A woman stepped forward. Cora recognized her. Mrs. Hale, a mother of 2 of her students. She looked at Miller. My husband works downstream. Our well went dry last summer. If what she says is true, we have a right to know. Miller rounded on her. You are going to believe a schoolteacher over me? I am going to believe evidence. Mrs. Hale looked at the sheriff. Let him have a trial. If he is guilty, we will know. Other voices rose. Let him talk. Let him answer. The sheriff held up a hand. All right. All right. Granger, you get a hearing. Tomorrow morning. Until then, you are in a cell. He gestured to the deputies. Take him. They dragged Wyatt toward the jail. He looked back at Cora. His eyes were steady. She nodded. She would not leave him. That night, Cora sat in the boarding house and planned. Danny brought her the maps and the survey notes her uncle had kept. She spread them on the small table and studied the lines of water, the marks showing where the old channels had been, where the dams were hidden upstream. She made notes. She wrote out questions. She thought about what Wyatt had said. People do not want the truth. They want a story that fits. She would give them a story they could not ignore. At dawn, she went to the jail. The sheriff let her in. Wyatt sat on a narrow cot in the cell, his face shadowed. He stood when he saw her. You should not be here. Where else would I be? She pulled a folded paper from her coat. I have the survey notes. I have the original land grants. I can prove the dams are illegal. That does not mean they will listen. Then I will make them listen. She met his eyes. I am not afraid anymore. You should be. If you push this, Miller and the council will come after you. Let them. She smiled, small and fierce. I would rather die standing than live hiding. Wyatt reached through the bars and took her hand. His grip was tight. You are the bravest person I have ever met. I learned it from you. No. You were always brave. You just did not know it. He looked at her like he was memorizing her face. If this goes wrong, promise me you will leave. Go back to Missouri. Live. If this goes wrong, I am staying. I am not losing you. Cora, I love you. The words came out simple and true. She had not planned to say them. But they were there, solid and undeniable. I love you. And I am not running. Wyatt stared at her. Then he pulled her close and kissed her through the bars, hard and desperate. When he let go, his voice was rough. I love you too. The sheriff cleared his throat. Time is up, Miss Mercer. She squeezed Wyatt's hand once and let go. I will see you at the hearing. The hearing was held in the town hall, a cramped room with wooden benches and a single table at the front. The Basin Council sat behind the table, 5 men in dark coats. Miller was in the center. The sheriff stood to one side. Townspeople filled the benches. Cora sat in the front row. Danny sat beside her. Wyatt was brought in with his hands bound. He stood before the council. Miller leaned forward. Wyatt Granger, you are accused of water theft, destruction of property, and conspiracy to defraud the basin landowners. How do you answer? Not guilty. Miller smiled. We have testimony from 3 ranchers. We have records showing decreased water flow to their properties. We have proof that you cut channels without authorization. What do you have? The truth. Wyatt's voice was calm. The channels I cut were restorations of the original waterways. The Basin Council has been covering up the real theft. The upstream ranchers built dams 20 years ago. Those dams are illegal. They have been stealing water from the entire basin. I have been trying to fix it. Miller slammed his hand on the table. That is a lie. There are no dams. You are inventing a conspiracy to save yourself. Cora stood. She pulled the maps from her satchel and walked to the front. May I speak? Miller glared at her. This is not a schoolroom, Miss Mercer. It is a hearing. And I have evidence. She spread the maps on the table. These are the original land grants. They show the natural water courses. These notes are from the county surveyor, dated 1853. They show where the water flowed before any settlement. She pointed to a series of marks. These are the current channels. You can see the discrepancies. The water has been diverted upstream. One of the council members leaned forward. Where are these supposed dams? Here. She pointed to 3 locations on the map. Hidden in narrow canyons. Reinforced with stone and timber. They are small enough to look natural, unless you know what you are looking for. Miller laughed. You expect us to believe that 3 major ranches have been hiding illegal dams for 20 years? Yes. Cora looked at him. Because you are one of them. Your ranch is upstream. You have been profiting from the stolen water. That is why you want Wyatt silenced. He knows the truth. The room erupted. The council members shouted. The crowd murmured. The sheriff banged his rifle butt on the floor. Order. Order. Miller stood. This is slander. I will not sit here and be accused by some schoolteacher who does not know the first thing about water rights. Cora did not flinch. Then ride up to the canyons and prove me wrong. If there are no dams, you have nothing to fear. Miller's face went dark. He looked at the other council members. They exchanged glances. Finally, one of them nodded. We will send a party to investigate. If the dams exist, we will take action. If they do not, Miss Mercer and Mr. Granger will face charges of false accusation. Agreed, Cora said. The council adjourned. Wyatt was taken back to his cell. Cora walked outside and found Danny waiting. He looked grim. You just made yourself a target. I know. They are not going to let you win this. They do not have a choice. She looked at the sky. It was cloudy and cold. A storm was building again. We ride up to the canyons tomorrow. We find the dams. We bring back proof. And if Miller tries to stop us, then we stop him. That night, Cora could not sleep. She sat in the dark and thought about the dams and the ride tomorrow, and the way Wyatt had looked at her through the bars. She thought about her father and the way he had died, broken and silent. She would not let Wyatt die that way. She would not let herself die that way. At dawn, the sheriff assembled a party. Cora, Danny, 2 council members, and the sheriff. Miller refused to come. He claimed business elsewhere. Cora did not argue. She knew what that meant. They rode north into the hills. The air was cold, and the sky was heavy with clouds. By midday, they reached the first canyon. It was narrow and steep-walled, a dry gash in the rock. Cora dismounted and walked up the stream. 50 yards in, she found it. A wall of stone and timber, 10 feet high, wedged into the canyon throat. Water pooled behind it, dark and still. The sheriff stared. "I will be damned." Cora turned to the council members. "Is this enough proof?" One of them nodded slowly. "This is illegal. No question." They found the second dam an hour later, the third by late afternoon. Each one was built the same way, hidden and solid. By the time they rode back to town, the storm had broken. Rain poured down, cold and driving. The sheriff went straight to the jail. He released Wyatt without a word. Wyatt walked out into the rain and found Cora waiting. He stopped. She stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him. He held her tight, his face buried in her hair. "You did it," he said. "We did it." The Basin Council held an emergency meeting that night. Miller was stripped of his seat. The upstream ranches were ordered to dismantle the dams and pay restitution. Wyatt was cleared of all charges. The town buzzed with the news. People who had crossed the street to avoid him now nodded when he passed. Cora saw the change. She saw the way he walked a little taller. But Miller did not go quietly. 2 days later, word came that he had refused the council order. He had barricaded himself on his ranch and sworn he would fight before he gave up the water. The sheriff called for a posse. Wyatt volunteered. So did Danny. So did a dozen other men. Cora found Wyatt in the stable, saddling his horse. She caught his arm. "You do not have to do this." "Yes, I do. If Miller is not stopped, this starts all over again. Then, I am coming with you." "No." Wyatt turned to face her. "This is not a cattle drive. This is a fight. Men are going to get hurt, maybe killed. Then you need someone with a clear head." She met his eyes. "I am coming." He stared at her. Then, he nodded. "You stay behind the line. You do not take risks. I will take the same risks you take." He almost smiled. "Stubborn." "Yes." They rode out at dawn. The posse numbered 20 men. The sheriff led. Wyatt rode beside Cora. Danny brought up the rear. They reached Miller's ranch by mid-morning. The main house sat on a low hill, surrounded by a fence. Armed men stood on the porch and in the yard. Miller stepped out, rifle in hand. "You are trespassing, Sheriff." "I have a writ, Miller." "Stand down. I do not recognize your authority. This is my land, my water. You want it? You come and take it." The sheriff raised his hand. The posse spread out. Tension crackled in the air. Cora's pulse hammered. She looked at Wyatt. He was calm, his hand near his belt. Miller raised his rifle. "First man who crosses that fence gets shot." The sheriff hesitated. Cora saw the moment stretching. She saw men shifting, fingers on triggers. She saw the inevitable slide toward violence. She spurred her horse forward. Wyatt shouted her name. She ignored him. She rode straight toward the fence. Miller swung his rifle toward her. She did not stop. "Miller," she called. Her voice carried. "You have already lost. The dams are coming down. The council has ruled. If you fight, you die. If you surrender, you live. Choose." Miller's face twisted. "You think I am afraid of you?" "No. I think you are afraid of losing everything. But if you shoot me, you lose anyway. You hang for murder. Your family loses the ranch. Your name is destroyed." She reined in 10 feet from the fence. "Or you walk away now. You keep your life. Maybe even your freedom. Choose." Miller stared at her. His rifle shook. The men behind him shifted, uncertain. Finally, one of them lowered his weapon. Then another. Miller looked around and saw his support crumbling. He lowered the rifle. "Damn you," he said. The sheriff rode forward. Miller was taken into custody. His men surrendered without a fight. The posse secured the ranch. Wyatt rode up beside Cora. His face was pale. "Do not ever do that again." "I had to. You could have been killed, but I was not." She smiled, shaky. And it worked. He pulled her from her horse and kissed her hard, right there in front of the posse and the prisoners and everyone. When he let go, his hands framed her face. "You are going to be the death of me, or the life of you." She kissed him again, softer. "Let's go home." The town of Eagle Basin changed after that. The dams came down. The water returned. The small ranches downstream recovered. Wyatt's name was cleared completely. He and Cora rebuilt Willow Ranch together. They worked side by side, mending fences, rebuilding the barn damaged by the storm, planning for the spring herd. People stopped whispering when they passed. They started asking for advice. They started seeing Wyatt as what he was, a man who kept his word. Cora kept teaching, but she no longer felt like she was hiding. She stood in front of her students and spoke with confidence. She walked through town and met people's eyes. She had earned her place. She had proven herself. Not by being perfect, by being brave. On a cold morning in early spring, Wyatt found her in the barn, brushing down Rosie. He leaned against the stall door and watched her. She glanced up and smiled. "What?" "Nothing. Just looking." "At what?" "At you." He stepped inside and took her hand. "I have been thinking." "About what?" "About how much I owe you. You saved my life. You saved the ranch. You gave me a reason to stop running. You gave me a reason to start." She squeezed his hand. "We saved each other." He pulled a small box from his coat pocket. "Then let's make it official." He opened the box. Inside was a simple gold band. "Marry me, Cora." Her throat tightened. "Yes." He slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. She looked at him and saw everything she had been afraid to want. A partner. A home. A future built on trust and hard choices. And the kind of love that did not flinch when things got hard. They were married a week later in the small church at the edge of town. Mrs. Hale and half the town came. Danny stood up as witness. Parsons smiled and said he had known it would work out. Cora wore a new dress, pale blue, and Wyatt wore a clean shirt and a nervous smile. When the preacher said they were man and wife, Wyatt kissed her and the church erupted in applause. They rode back to Willow Ranch as the sun set. The sky was clear and cold and full of stars. Wyatt helped Cora down from her horse, and they stood together in the yard, looking at the house. It was small and weathered, but it was theirs. "What are you thinking?" Wyatt asked. "That I am glad I signed that paper." She leaned into him. "That I am glad I stayed." "Me too." He wrapped his arms around her. "I love you. I love you too." They went inside. The fire was already burning. Danny had left food and a bottle of whiskey on the table. They ate and talked and laughed. Later, when the fire burned low, they went to bed and held each other in the dark. Outside, the wind moved through the cottonwoods, and the cattle shifted in the barn, and the land settled into the quiet of a frontier night. Cora lay awake for a moment, Wyatt's arm across her waist, his breath warm against her neck. She thought about the girl she had been, hiding in a Missouri boarding house, afraid of her own shadow. She thought about the woman she had become, the one who had ridden into a storm and stood in front of a rifle and chosen love over safety. She closed her eyes and smiled. She had found her place. She had found her strength. She had found the man who saw her for who she was and loved her because of it, not in spite of it. And that was worth every hard mile, every cold night, every moment of fear. She slept, and in the morning the sun rose red and clear over the basin. The water ran free. The land was theirs. And together, they would make it last. The years that followed were not easy. The basin had good seasons and bad. There were droughts and early frosts and cattle lost to winter storms. But Wyatt and Cora faced them together. They hired help when they could. They worked dawn to dark when they could not. They learned the rhythms of the land and the patience it demanded. Cora kept teaching through the first 2 years. Then she found out she was carrying their first child, and the town hired a new teacher. She did not mind. She had other work now, work that mattered just as much. She helped Wyatt with the books. She managed the supply orders. She learned to brand and rope and ride fence line. She became as much a rancher as he was. Their daughter was born in the spring, a small, red-faced thing with a strong cry. They named her Grace, after Wyatt's mother. Cora held her in the rocking chair Wyatt had built, and felt a kind of completeness she had not known was possible. Wyatt stood in the doorway and watched them, his face soft, in a way it never was for anyone else. "She is perfect," he said. "She is ours." He crossed the room and knelt beside the chair. He touched Grace's tiny hand. She gripped his finger and held on. Wyatt looked at Cora. "Thank you." "For what?" "For this. For everything. For not giving up on me. I never will." On a bright morning 10 years after that first cattle drive, Cora stood on the porch of the ranch house and watched Wyatt and Grace ride out to check the herd. Grace was 8 now, fearless and stubborn, her father's daughter in every way. She sat her horse like she had been born to it. Wyatt rode beside her, patient and proud. Cora smiled. The ranch was thriving. The water flowed clean and steady. The basin had healed, and the name Granger no longer carried a shadow. It carried respect. She thought about the inheritance reading all those years ago. She thought about the moment Wyatt had walked through the door and looked at her like she was someone who mattered. She thought about the choice she had made to stay, to fight, to risk everything for something real. It had been the best choice of her life. She went inside to start the day's work. There was bread to bake and laundry to hang, and 100 small tasks that made up the life they had built. But she did it all with a light heart. Because she was not hiding anymore. She was living, and the man she loved was riding home to her, the same way he did every day, steady and true. That was what love looked like. Not perfect, not easy, but earned. One hard choice at a time. One storm weathered together. One promise kept. And it was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything.